5 games in the NFL in Week 10 came down to game-winning field goals. EJ was, of course, at one of them up in Seattle for Seahawks Commanders. And this game was, or really this week in general, was so awesome that Seahawks and Commanders game didn't even make our list that we're talking about today because we have so much more to discuss. And contrary to the desire of our audience, we can't do 3-hour podcasts every single Monday or we will die. So we narrowed it down to the 5 best games of Week 10, at least the Sunday part of Week 10 that we're going to talk about. EJ, how you feeling? Have you recovered from the weather that you endured?
Sure, it wasn't that bad. Our seats were under cover, but it was chilly. There's a nice wind blowing off the water yesterday. Players had to deal with it as well, but no shortage of good games to put on the slate this week. In fact, we probably put a couple on the cutting room floor that on any other given week would have ended up on the final agenda. But the ones we've got are high quality, and that's really the way I feel about the week overall. I was watching the early slate before I headed up to that game, and I thought, I don't know, we might have 5 in the early slate we could talk about. And then, nonetheless, the late slate. So good week of football, fun to get out, see those teams compete, get to see Sam Howell in person for the first time. That was cool. And we've got a lot of good football to go over.
Reminder, by the way, that we're recording this on Monday before Monday Night Football, before the Broncos and Bills game. So we're not going to get to talk about them because that game hasn't happened yet. We do sincerely hope that they've learned that James Cook is allowed to touch the ball, but we'll talk about that on Thursday in the Bengals Ravens TNF game. Until then, we're hoping to see the Bills actually play like the Bills. We're going to start off with, speaking of the Bengals, talking about the Bengals who just went down to the fighting CJ Strouds in Houston. I think at this point, there's not much else we can possibly say about CJ Stroud. He is not just a top 5 quarterback, or at least playing like a top 5 quarterback in his own conference. He's playing like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And for a rookie to do that on the road against a contending team, against a great defensive coordinator, down Nico Collins, what else can you possibly say about this kid? I mean, he is resetting expectations for what a rookie quarterback is capable of in the NFL. And we've seen some great rookie years. Justin Herbert was phenomenal. Andrew Luck was phenomenal. Even once upon a time in Houston, Deshaun Watson, before he tore his ACL in his rookie year, that might have been the best he ever played, was in that first half of his rookie year. And yet watching CJ Stroud every week, I still think that Stroud's playing better than even Deshaun did at the height of his powers in Houston. Like, this is not normal. And when you juxtapose what Stroud's doing to, when we were watching Bryce Young on Thursday night, my God, like, they couldn't look any more different than they do. Like, it's amazing to me how catastrophic potentially that decision for Carolina has ended up, looking at how good Stroud has been in Houston. Like, I never in a million years would have imagined the difference being this wide.
Landing spot is massive, but it's much more than that. And we're running out of superlatives about CJ Stroud by the week. First, it was, man, he's coming along faster than we thought for a rookie. Then it was, I think he's the best of the rookie class. And then it was, man, is he playing better than a bunch of established starters? And then it was, oh man, he's playing as well as established veteran starters. He's playing, like, over the last 2 weeks, borderline elite football for the NFL. Forget rookie, forget, landing spot, any of that stuff. And when you say resetting rookie expectations, he's obliterating them. The fact that he's going to win offensive rookie of the year. Hey man, that was so last week. Like, he's going to be in position for offensive MVP. Like, he could be in that conversation. And to even say that is ridiculous for a rookie quarterback, or has been historically. And if you keep going up, it's like, where's the ceiling? Because it almost kind of feels like, as well as he's playing, he hasn't hit a ceiling yet. And that's, like, borderline terrifying.
Yeah, in the preview show, we talked about how the Texans just figured out that they don't have to go run, pass, and that they can let him actually throw. Like the Tampa game was the first time they did that. And then it's like, oh, he threw for almost 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. What happens if we do it again? Oh, he beat the Bengals on the road. Like even the Texans for the first half of the year were coaching like we're not sure uh, what we can get away with here. And every time they throw more at him, he's just like, okay, cool. Like, got it. Like, no Nico Collins, fine. On the road against Cincy, fine.
Cool.
Like, let me outduel unquestionably a top 3 quarterback in the league on the road in a high pressure game because we're trying to keep pace with Jacksonville in the division. Like, it's just unreal. Like the fact that Joe Burrow had a mostly normal Joe Burrow game. Like obviously there were some struggles. He was under pressure a lot. The pressure allowed percentage was 47%, second highest in the NFL, only behind the Giants this week. So Burrow was under a lot of heat, but he still made typical Burrow plays, like the one where he kind of rolled out to his left and uncorked that ball to Jamar for the long touchdown. And like he did have the 2 picks, but the fact that Joe Burrow can look like Joe Burrow and Stroud still looked like the best quarterback on the field, like I have no way to process this because I didn't even think it was possible. And I loved CJ Stroud as a prospect. But you'd be lying. Anybody would be lying if they said that was what they expected. Nobody expected that.
No, the fact that CJ Stroud looked like Joe Burrow for the first 2.5 quarters of this game, there were just lasers everywhere. It's not like Burrow had a down day and CJ looked great. They looked like each other. They just threw so many lasers it could have been a Star Wars movie, both of them. And until about midway through the third quarter, when the wheels came off for interceptions with both of them, they traded interceptions within a couple of possessions. Until then, you couldn't have told if you took the colors off the uniform in black and white film, sort of grayed out the faces, you would have been like, that looks like Burrow carving up a defense. That looks like Burrow in terms of ball placement and accuracy, throws on time. This is all within the structure of the offense, too. A lot of times when we see rookie starters excel, even some of the stuff Anthony Richardson was doing before he got hurt that we were really excited about in the first month, that wasn't on schedule stuff. Some of it was, but a bunch of it was busted plays. He's huge. He can run through sack attempts, and then he uncorks a big arm, and you're like, wow, that's a lot of potential. When he grows into it, like Stroud's already in the he's grown into it portion. He's standing in the pocket, carving up very good defenses with the kind of accuracy that you would expect from the guy across the line that he's playing against. That's not normal. Like how not normal that is. All of us that like CJ Stroud, love CJ Stroud. If you ask almost anybody what their pre-draft rank on CJ Stroud was, it's below a guy like Burrow. Yesterday,
Yeah.
in a game that counted, they stood across the line and played basically mirror image football for like 2.5 quarters. That's stupid.
I think the fact that he's able to elevate like a receiving core that we liked Nico Collins. We liked,
Sure.
the separation ability of Tank Dell. We liked Schultz as like a safety blanket tight end. I mean, we loved Dameon Pierce going into this game, but we liked Singletary. The fact that he can take them, Noah Brown as your wide receiver 3 or Robert Woods as your old man veteran wide receiver 4. Like we liked the supporting cast, but there was no like clear top tier like game breaking weapon. But he's elevated this group to being like one of the 3 or 4 most productive passing games in the entire NFL. I mean, they had 17 explosive plays yesterday without Nico Collins. And Nate Tice put out a note that they had the most explosive plays for an offense in a single game, or 4th most explosive plays for an offense in a single game since 2000. Stroud wasn't even alive. Okay? Like it's not just that he's great. It's the fact that he's elevating good players to be great. And it's so rare for quarterbacks to be able to do that. And honestly, one of the last ones that we saw do it was Joe when he took him to the Super Bowl in year 2, get him Jamar Chase and all of a sudden they're unstoppable. Like what happens if you get Malik Neighbors to CJ Stroud. Like, what do you do? Like, nothing.
This class of wide receivers, and we'll talk plenty about this in the draft coverage, is special. And if you've watched our draft coverage for the last 3 years, you know that we've been saying that year over year. Wow, this is a really good wide receiver class. Wow, this is another really good wide receiver class. Wow, this wide receiver class isn't quite as good as the last 2 years, but it's still pretty good. This wide receiver class coming out is that good or better. It is a special, special class. It has stars, it has depth. Trying to just determine like a top 10, which is normally a decently fine exercise, is going to be excruciating. So it's likely they're going to get a game-breaking wide receiver, even if they don't pick one up high. But let's be honest. We weren't talking about Noah Brown. Noah Brown was the guy that was on the Cowboys that moved to the Texans. And Noah Brown over the last 2 games is 13 receptions on 14 targets, 11 of those for first downs, 325 yards, and a TD. So suddenly he is just another Ohio State wide receiver that's kicking ass in the pros. Like, nobody was talking about Noah Brown. Noah Brown looks like an alpha game breaker over the last 2 weeks. That's not Noah Brown. Like, all credit to Noah Brown. He's a very good wide receiver, comes from a very good program. He played with Dak. He had some games, but not like this. This is
They brought him in for one thing and one thing only. Like, I swear to God, they sat him down first day he got there and said, Noah, you're going to run the deep crosses for us. You're not going to do anything else. You're going to run deep crosses all day long, and you're going to be wide ass open. You know why? Because you're going to be running the deep cross, and that's always wide ass open. Like, we're going to call flood 10 times a game. Guess what, buddy? That's your concept. And you're going to catch it over and over and over again. If we need to beat man coverage, we'll go to Tank Dell. But like everything else, like, you are the zone beater, buddy. Get ready. And they've done it. Like, they've fed him the ball, and he's open every single time, like, without fail.
And I think a lot of defenses come into the game and go, okay, who are we going to stop? Well, we got Nico. Oh, Tank's really coming on. We got to worry about their running game. They got a couple of talented running backs. They got Dalton Schultz. He can come on if he needs to. Like, okay, these are the top tier. Oh yeah, they got Noah Brown. Like, oh yeah, they got Robert Woods. We're not worried about those guys. Like, defensive coordinators who are looking at recent film for the next few Texans opponents are going to be like, huh, what do we got for Noah Brown? Like, I did not come into this game at the beginning of the year thinking we were going to have to stop Noah Brown. But if we let Noah Brown do Noah Brown things, we're going to lose. And that is directly a reflection on Stroud and Slowick. It's not a conversation we expected to be having at this point of the year.
On the other side of the ball, another thing I didn't expect about the Texans, we like Sheldon Rankins, or at least going into the year. Like, we like he's had a very solid career. We like Jonathan Grenard. We loved Will Anderson as a prospect. But we didn't think that the sum of these parts was going to be an elite pass rush. It's a bunch of dudes we like and one dude that we loved, right?
Mm-hmm.
But D'Amico Ryans and his staff have elevated, again, kind of like, I don't want to say like a ragtag group, but like kind of close to that, They've elevated this group of guys we liked into being just legitimate world beaters. Like, I made the point earlier, 47% pressure rate, second highest in the league this week. They had 32 pressures as a team. Both of Burrow's interceptions were because of pressure. On the first one, Sheldon Rankins absolutely demolished the right guard, who I can't remember the name of the right guard for the Bengals right now, but like, he beat him on an inside spin, and like, you could see Burrow like, oh shit, and he kind of sailed it over the top of his tight end and got picked. And then in the second one, Grenard just completely collapsed Orlando Brown and flushed him, and then he threw the pick in the end zone. But like, this Bengals offensive line just got the shit kicked out of them the entire day by this Texans front. And again, it's one of those, like, they're spending no money on this group, and they're getting like top of the league type production out of it. What happens when they spend in March and they bring in even more dudes? Like, this is already a really good team, and they have crazy cap space. They have an elite young quarterback. Like, the guys that they have to pay, like, it's not going to be game breaking for their wallet. this is only the beginning for Houston. Like if they can do this to Cincinnati now, what are they going to do in 2024 and 2025? Like that's what's really exciting for me as a Texans fan. Like I have no illusions about us winning the Super Bowl this year. Like we're not going to, but next year, I don't know, man. It's not that far off.
Could be a very year 2 Burrow type ascension. And Robert Mays put out a thing saying that he mentioned on his podcast that he thinks Nick Caserio, really deserves GM of the Year consideration because of a lot of these, lower profile moves that have just hit and hit and hit and hit. And it is a combination of getting Stroud and getting D'Amico Ryans for sure and his staff. Like those things certainly, but that's what a good GM does, is match the roster to the needs, certainly, and to the coaching staff. And it's all coming up roses right now. Offensive side, we talked about a lot. Defensive side, they brought in Devin Singletary as a free agent. We were like, yeah, whatever. Like Texans found a running game yesterday with Devin Singletary. I was like, what? 30 carries, 150 yards in this economy? Like in the modern NFL, somebody got 30 carries and went off for 100.5. I mean, not to mention it was Devin Singletary, who I think is a nice complimentary back, but never had that kind of success as a lead back in Buffalo. Like, there's just surprises all over this roster. Rankin's, coming on late in the year, 11 pressures yesterday from an interior spot. That's edging up towards like Dexter Lawrence numbers, that would have been heresy if you'd said to anyone. I think still, if you say to most NFL fans, like, I don't know, Rankin's had a, borderline Dexter Lawrence, I'd be like, no, well, he had 11 pressures in one game rushing from the interior.
And 3 sacks too.
Right. Like that is exactly that kind of a performance. Again, is that something we predicted out of this group, out of that side of the ball? No, we said, look, they got Will Anderson. He's going to give him some rush. Got some other young guys that can help a little bit, but they feel more like complementary players. They're a year away. They're going to need to get another big threat, kind of like what the 49ers just did, right? They're going to need to add another end. I think the Raiders are in the same spot with Crosby. They need to add somebody to take pressure off him because he's getting the lights double teamed out of him right now. Like that's the way we thought Will Anderson was going to be. And all of a sudden, like Grenard is exploding and Rankins is having games like this. Will's still been great. It's not like Will's been some wilting daisy. Like he's still in there creating pressure the way we thought he would. But again, every move the Texans have made, it all looks like a positive right now.
Overall, I'm on cloud 9. Again, I don't think a deep run is in the cards this year. I think they'll make it. I think they'll make the playoffs, but boy, it's a tall order to go to Kansas City in January and say like, oh yeah, we're going to win. Like, probably not. But the jump start that this franchise has had is just incredible. So, Cincinnati, great game. Never want to do that again because it was a heart attack. I would prefer to not see that team again in January because I do think that Burrow will make us pay in round 2. But it was fun the first time. I shouldn't say fun. It was nerve-wracking the first time. I'm just happy we got out of there with the win. Lions Chargers, the other team that I follow closely because I work for them. I am so very frustrated, EJ. I really am. And partially because I'm literally working on an episode on the Chargers pass rush right now on the package when they got Bosa and Mack and Thule out there, and they just absolutely demolish everybody when they do that. They had 40 pressures last week, and I was like, let's do an episode on that because like one of the things the Chargers have been really good at this year is getting after the passer. Then they go up against Detroit, where Goff has an average time to throw of 2.49 seconds, gets the ball out incredibly quickly, and even when the pass rushers for the Chargers won, the ball was gone. Like there was nothing they could do. Like it was just out. And Goff just put on a master class. Like he found the open receiver every single time immediately. So decisive, so accurate. Set his guys up for yards after catch. Like it was one of Goff's best games as a Lion, and that's saying a lot because he's had a lot of really good games as a Lion. But I was so frustrated watching that game back because I'm like, even when they win, it doesn't matter. Like they combined for 9 total pressures because the ball was out so quickly. Last week they had 40. And it wasn't just that the Lions offensive line played well. Obviously they did, especially in the run game. But it's the fact that Goff knew going into it Like, I cannot set my guys up for failure by holding the ball for 3 seconds. I can't. Has to be out. And he stuck to it. Every single drop back, ball was out. And as a defense, it's got to be the most frustrating thing in the world to play against that, because you can do everything right as a pass rusher and still lose. And at some point, and this hurts to say as somebody who like covers the team and watches every single game, at some point, it's unacceptable that USC and the Chargers look like the same team. And I think we're at that point.
Yeah, that's a dagger. I feel for Khalil Mack because a lot of his time in Chicago was the same thing. He was the dominant edge rusher, and you could see teams' game plans. It was like everything's going away from him. If we go at him in the run, we're going to triple team him and frustrate the hell out of him, and everything else rolls the other way. Like, we're going to roll to the other side. We're going to get the ball out quick. Like, he would rush and rush and rush, and the ball would be gone, or he'd get no help. And now he goes to the Chargers and he's like, all right, I got help. We got a great blitz package. Let's go do this. And Goff's like, maybe not. But, Matt Waldman put out a great tweet today. He said, I'm old enough to remember when, Jared Goff was Sean McVay's puppet and couldn't handle the blitz. And this is a combination. This is a great synergistic piece of football between the young offensive line of the Lions that they assembled. I remember putting out tweets 2 years ago, like, whoever they get at quarterback is going to be well protected, thinking at that point they might move on from Goff because Goff had not continued to improve to get to be where he is now. But they invested a lot in that line, a lot of high draft picks, a lot of money, and they had a very good young group that was playing cohesively. Then you get, Ben Johnson and Jared Goff vibing, and it's the three groups, right? We got the offensive line, we got the quarterback who understands it, and we got an offensive play caller who is saying, we know what the Chargers are going to bring, and we're going to design a game with plenty of hots, plenty of outs. We are not going to make you hold the ball and be a hero for 3 seconds. And all three of those phases kind of working together, and you get what you got yesterday, which is a super well-oiled Lions pass game that, despite a very good pass rush, rarely looked under pressure. You said it, under single digit pressures on the day against that group. That's a tremendous achievement, and it takes all three of those parts working in concert, and the Lions got that yesterday. Strangely enough, the Chargers weren't helpless in this one. Like, on the offensive side of the ball, like, when again you flip the script, watching Herbert throw absolute rips. Some of those throws that Herbert made yesterday are going to end up on like his career highlight record, not the season highlight record. He was driving dots. I mean, that is the Justin Herbert that we've been expecting. And we've been saying the same thing about Burrow for a long time. Obviously, Burrow's been quote unquote back now for 2.5 or 3 weeks, but Herbert hurt his finger. He's been wearing a splint. It's definitely been, holding him down. He either got used to it or it's healed up or both, because that was vintage Justin Herbert. It sounds weird to say vintage because he's not that old, but like that was game-breaking arm talent, on time, on target. And to me, it just ended up feeling like an NFL game of horse, right? Justin would go back and rip one to Keenan, and then Goff would come out and he'd rip one to Amon-Ra, and then they'd switch, and then they'd come out and go, oh yeah, anything you can do, I can do better. He'd rip another one to Keenan, and they'd switch ends, and then Goff would come back and rip another one to Amon-Ra. They're like, oh yeah. And it just felt like two shooters going around the court going, all right, between the legs, behind the back, one-legged, put your hand over your eye, hit the three.
Does that make does that mean David Montgomery is the dude who pulls up in the middle of the game and drains one from half court and walks away? Because that's basically what he did
behind his back with a nice little little referee toss behind the back from half court. That movie hit in the middle of that run was, look, I watched a lot of David Montgomery, pre-draft when he was at Iowa State. And then, of course, he got drafted by the Bears. I got to see a lot of very good runs, sort of, I don't want to say wasted, but spent in an offense that wasn't otherwise very supportive. But you could see that he had all that. He had those flashes. And then between year 1 and year 2, he came back and he specifically worked on his speed, because that was a knock. Great power, good vision, runs with toughness, but can't break things away. Came back, dropped a little bit of weight, really focused on, power, speed, explosion, and started to rip off longer runs. And he still had those moves. And people said, oh, he's just a between the tackles guy, right? And it was like, you're not really watching him. He's got that in the tank. And so a little bit of a role reversal with him and Gibbs yesterday in terms of pretty much everything. The long breakaway
Yeah.
run was Montgomery. The goal line touches were good. Like it just, but that's an adaptable offense all the way around in terms of, hey, we got to throw it quicker to get away from the blitz. Hey, we're gonna leverage our playmakers. Hey, we're gonna switch it up. If they're ready for one thing, we're gonna hit them with a hook. And it just all worked. The Chargers came out there good enough to win in that game. When you say you're frustrated, I like get it 100%, because Alex Katzen was with me at the game yesterday. He also covers the Chargers, and he was on his phone the whole time. And he's like, he kept holding it up over his shoulder, like, no, like, what happened? But it was this battle back and forth. Like, hey, they tied it up, and they played toe to toe against one of the top offenses in the league. And they looked just like them. They looked like a top offense, and they were good enough to win. But on balance, the Lions were better. Like, the Lions defense was better than the Chargers defense by enough that they come away with a big road victory.
Yeah, I mean, the first couple punts and the early pick, even though all those were super early in the game, by the Lions defense, like those first couple three stops total, honestly might have been the difference, because they scored on every single drive from like mid-second quarter on. They only had 9 possessions in this game and still put up 421 yards of offense. They had an average drive length of 46 yards. Like, are you kidding me? That's your average drive is 46 yards. And the only 2 stops they had were in the first quarter and then the pick early on. But, to be 50% on third down for the game, to be 100% on fourth down for the game, to be perfect in the red zone, so only give up, a few pressures themselves, no sacks, only had 3 penalties, and to lose. Like, it's so USC. Like, why does this always happen in LA? Like, I don't get it. It's just
must be an allergy to defense. But you talked about the fourth down tries. Both teams combined were 7 of 8 on fourth down, and there were 3 total punts split between the 2 teams. Like, both teams were just firing on offense yesterday. It was a fun game to watch, but yeah, in the end, if you're a Chargers fan, there was just resignation on Alex's face. He's like, yeah, so they lost. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, man. It looks like they put up a really good game. And then when I got home, I watched the tape and I was like, damn, they put up a really good game. It was, on most weeks, that is good enough to win. But especially the Chargers, they certainly have an aura to overcome. If it's not injuries, it's fading down the stretch, either in games or the season. And it's hard to see a game that well played through that much of it and not come away with W.
I also want to give the Lions credit for bouncing back from the Ravens absolutely destroying them. I think it's so easy to have a loss like that and to have like doubt creep in, or to just be like, oh my God, like, maybe we do have problems,
Yeah.
But to come back out and say like, no, we're gonna burn the tape. We're not even gonna bother with it. Like, the Ravens are good, cool, like, good on them, but we know what we are. Like, we know that we're gonna be a 12-13 win team. We're just going to treat that as just kind of a weird, wonky game that didn't go our way. We had a gauntlet of a schedule that was on the road. Fine, fuck it, whatever. To come back out almost like that Ravens game never happened, and to just immediately be, for lack of a better term, the Lions again. Sounds weird to have that be like a term for a good team now, but it is. Like, the Lions looked like the Lions, and the fact that when I say the Lions look like the Lions is a good thing and not a bad thing really tells you how far this team has come. But I really like that Dan Campbell kind of kept them focused and didn't let that Ravens loss derail what has otherwise been a pretty stellar season for them.
Great credit to Campbell as head coach of this team, that they have that ability. And it looked pretty normal. There weren't a lot of histrionics about, we got to get back up there. It was like, no, we got to do our thing, right? We got to do our thing that we've been doing since I got here, since training camp, since the offseason workouts. We got to do our stuff. And if we do our stuff, we can win the game. And that's actually a pretty good segue to the next game we're going to talk about, because the head coach of one of those teams went to the podium and said very much that. And it gives me faith that that team is going to be able to come out and rebound pretty quickly.
I mean, it was kind of both of them, honestly, because the Jaguars didn't do quote unquote their stuff, but the 49ers did do their stuff, i.e.,
Yep.
Just play like a bat out of hell along the defensive line. Their defensive line was amazing. Brock Purdy was decisive and took advantage of his matchups because everybody was back on the field. Trent was back, Debo's back, Kittle's healthy, Ayuk still Ayuk, CMC still CMC. Like, he had all the Infinity Stones, right? And the defensive line was rocking and rolling. And the Niners looked like the Niners. They got back to doing what they do well. And all of a sudden they looked again like a dominant football team. Who knew? Right. And I want to treat this with nuance, because I did put out the tweet like predicting like, hey, they're going to be in a midseason skid. And they did go on a midseason skid. But what I also said was, even with that skid, they're going to be fine. So they're going to be fine by January. They're going to go on a run. They're probably going to make the championship game, and we'll see what happens there. But like, football is a game of matchups, and the matchups they had in the middle of the season were not necessarily favorable ones, especially when they were banged up. Like, it's not a deep football team, but when they have all their dudes, they're pretty damn hard to beat. And they finally got all their dudes back. And so as long as they stay healthy, yeah, they're going to be fine. They're going to go on a run. The 3-game, losing streak in the middle of the season is going to just look like, an aberration, right? But I feel like there's such a reactionary culture to football where everybody's like, oh, the Niners are bad. Oh, no, the Niners are good again. And it's like, no, the Niners are still what the Niners were. It's just they ran into some really tough matchups schematically without all their guys. They got beat. But going forward, the rest of the year, they match up pretty well with everybody else they're going to play. And the other best team in the NFC, Philly, from a schematic perspective, I think they match up with Philly really well. So I think you can look at the mid part of their schedule and say, that's rough for them, while also having the opinion they're going to go on a run, because football, or the NFL season's really long, and it's a game of matchups, and two things can be true at once. And I just want people to realize like that you can look at a game against the Browns and be like, ooh, they're probably not going to win that one. And also look at a game against the Eagles and be like, I feel great about it.
This is the overlap of like two windows, right? And this was for the Niners, their Lions game against the Chargers. This was the game after the Ravens game where they got back to being themselves and were able to beat a really good opponent. And for the Jaguars, they're just in a different phase, right? A different part of the roller coaster. And this was their game against the Ravens, for lack of a better term. And, Doug Peterson came to the podium afterwards, and I really respect him for giving this answer. He got asked by a beat writer, like, hey, basically what happened? And he went to his notebook. He pulled out his notebook, and you could tell someone he marks up like to take to halftime to say, okay, what do we need? And he's like, all right, first drive, this happened. We missed a block here. We took a sack. We end up punting. Next drive, 3 and out, we punt. Next drive, miss assignment, guy ran the wrong route, like gave up a pressure, like that drive's dead. And he's like, these are all the things that we show our guys that we can correct, right? The Niners played good football and we didn't execute, so that, we lost our chance to win. And these are the points that we're going to go back. We're not going to say, hey, this is how you beat the Niners. That's over. We're going to go back and say, this is how you make sure that pressure doesn't end up in Trevor's face. This is how you, correct that route so two guys don't end up in the same place. And I thought it was a very sort of honest and illuminating answer. He wasn't treating it like state secrets. He wasn't doing I don't know. Did you see the Belichick press conference, which is classic Belichick press conference after the Frankfurt game?
No.
Oh God. You should watch it. You should find it and watch it. It is.
Is he just done? He's just over it.
He's so done. He's beating the hell out of the microphone. He's just abusing the microphone, like up and down, and completely like ashen, surly, grumpy, not answering. I mean, and I get it. It's frustrating when you're a coach and you worked all week, a lot of hours to get your stuff together, and your team does not come out and perform. There's been a lot of that for Belichick this season, and it's severely frustrating. But he was the petulant toddler on on the podium. And look, Doug did the same thing. He put in a lot of hours with his staff. He had a good plan. His team didn't execute. And instead he said, hey, this is why, this is why, and this is why, specifics right down every drive, and said, these are the things that we can control that we're going to go back and work on and get better. And, so again, do I have faith that they get a Lions game, comeback game against the Chargers next week after their Ravens game, for lack of a better term, against getting whooped by the 49ers, who were, coming back to full strength? Trent Williams, we knew that him playing was a major difference maker because he's that kind of player. But even on one ankle, the difference in the 49ers offense when Trent's on the field and the things that they can do and the security that Brock Purdy feels is night and day from their down period where they were losing games. Purdy was amazing in this one. I want to give him credit. We talk about all the guys coming back. Purdy's been in the lineup and they haven't won. Purdy played well enough yesterday against a good team that I think it is one of those games that will help move the needle for people that don't believe in Brock Purdy, from he's a guy you can win with, or he's a guy that you can win with in this system, to he's a guy you can win because of. His throw in the grasp to Kittle is if you haven't seen it, go watch nuts. It I don't know how that occurred. And he's
did you see the far hash one that he threw to Ayuk against the inverted Tampa 2? Far hash hole shot. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, all right.
This is the best game he played all year. I was damn, Brock. I think he heard all the criticisms of people that are they're not pushing the ball down the field. He's throwing big picks in big spots. And he came out just looking mad at the world and just started slinging it down the field. And I'm like, holy shit. And we had seen him do that in some games before, the Tampa game last year comes to mind, where he hit CMC down the boundary. We're like, okay, he's pressing it vertically more than Jimmy ever did. And this was the first game in a while where I'm like, he's pissed. He's legitimately pissed right now. He was out there with something to prove. And you could tell he was locked in because pressure didn't affect him. The times that the Jags did get pressure, fun fact, they actually had more pressures as a team than the Niners did, but they only had 1 sack compared to the Niners get 5.
If only somebody had said that they were close on the pass rush but didn't get home.
Oh, it was miserable watching this defense because they were on him. They were on him the Kittle throw
all day.
He had nowhere to step into. They were on him and he still got it out. And it was a remarkable performance. I think it was Brock's best game of the year. I don't even know if it was statistically the best, but on tape, that I had more stank faces watching Brock on tape this week than I have all year long. Cause there were some throws from wow, he just didn't give a shit in this one. He was going for it.
He gambles. It's part of his game. And you're going to have some plays with him every week that are no. Yes. That is the Brock Purdy, archetype right now. It's great. He can be on schedule. I'm not saying that, he's, the complete gambler you can't win with, but there are definitely some plays where the offensive staff are holding their breath, go, Brock, get rid of it. Brock, get rid of it. Brock, get rid of it. And he finally gets rid of it, to the third read deep down the field with a guy hanging off his jersey. And they're like, no. Oh, okay. 25 yards. Sweet. Let's go. And he played that way yesterday. And the Jags on the other side, I can't come up with a better way to describe it than just out of tune. They played hard. They came out with effort, but there were so many near misses, pressures leading to turnovers, could have been tight plays. I totally get Peterson's, and not even frustration, just assessment at the podium. We were right there. These are correctable things. This is not the coach coming to the podium and saying, I don't have any answers. He had every answer. Right. And he's a lot of this is execution. And sometimes that feels really hollow when a coach says it. But when a coach says, if we execute the block better here, Trevor doesn't get pressure in his face here, he doesn't throw that pick. It feels very direct and directive. And I think that's a great credit to the Jacksonville coaching staff. Certainly in stark contrast to their predecessors, who nobody likes to talk about, that we can prepare this team to win. And we just came out and had a day where we were out of sync. We were out of sorts, and we missed a lot of plays that could have kept us in this game sort of repeatedly. And that led to stalled drives, turnovers, things that really hurt us, and they just outdistanced us because they were in tune.
I mean, you had a sack where, Trevor, pre-snap, looked like he got into a screen, out of a look that they like to screen, and everybody heard it except the guy who was supposed to catch it, Jamal Agnew. So he's going out there blocking, and Trevor looks and he sees 5 guys blocking and nobody turning around to catch the ball, and he's like, "Oh shit!" And so he just had to eat the sack, right? But like they had the look, like they had numbers on it. If like Agnew just turned around, or I think it was Agnew, the receiver out there, if he just turned around and caught the ball, like they probably would have had a really big gain out of it. They had another sack where the left guard just was on the wrong count. He thought they were on 2, they were on 1, ball got snapped, he didn't move. Hargrave blew right by him, and you could see like he didn't expect the ball to be snapped. I'm like, that's just procedural stuff, man. That's like that's can you listen in the huddle? Can you get the right count when Trevor's rattling it off? And they just came out and just looked completely discombobulated. They looked It's interesting how they looked prepared on paper, but not prepared on the field. Like the calls they made were good.
I would
The
agree.
players just weren't executing it. And at the end of the day, obviously that's on the coaches. Like you got to get your players prepared. But I didn't think the game plan was bad. I just thought the execution was horrific.
And sometimes that does fall on the players, right? Because again, you can put players in good spots, and it wasn't that they didn't. They did. They put players in good spots. You could see how that would work against that team, against that coverage, on that down. And sometimes, players will say it. Look, we just got to make plays. It's unfortunately usually right when their coach is about to get fired. Like, hey man, we got to support the coach. We got to do our deal. This isn't that, but at some point, like, you can't listen for the guard in the huddle. He's got to pick up the right cadence. You can't. There was one in the Sunday night game last night with the Jets where 2 tight ends went out to block and nobody turned their back to catch the screen. And they both tight ends, you could see, looked at each other like, man, I thought I was supposed to be out here. I thought I was supposed to be out here. And it was like, I'm sure the Jets coaching staff isn't happy with that one. It's not on Zach Wilson. Like as a result, one of the pieces of protection he thought he had wasn't there, and he took blitzer right in the face. And that's just, sometimes it is on the player. So it felt like it just, if you were ever hopeful after a loss, Jags fans, like, this is not they were unprepared, this is not they came out flat, this is, look, they came out prepared from a mental standpoint, but they didn't execute from a physical standpoint. That is correctable, or more easily correctable than the whole like scrambled egg mess of we just don't know what happened to us. We're going to have to like burn the film and go to the next week.
Overall, I'll give the same message on the Jags that I gave on the Niners. They're going to be fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry about it. They're going to be fine. They're going to make the playoffs. And once they're in the playoffs, like, they're talented enough, they can go on a run, but they're going to be fine. Like, the sky is not falling.
And San Francisco's a good team. Like, we're seeing this with the Ravens. Like, look, Hawks fans had existential crisis after the Ravens game. They're like, oh my God, we are not a good football team. And I was like, you're a fine football team. I would say better than average.
That's a really good football team, though.
The Ravens right now, up until that point, we're firing on all cylinders on both sides. You just hit a team that was finely tuned, and you don't match up with them very well. And that's the same thing that happens. Lions fans were like, wait, does this mean we're not going to the Super Bowl? And it's like, no, it means you ran into a Ravens team that was ready to go. A little bit for the Jags fans as well. You didn't execute, but San Francisco also came fully back, and they're an elite team when they're fully back. Again, don't put too much stock in it. Just chalk it up to, hey, they're a better team and they're a good team.
Speaking of good team, I'll tell you what, the sky was falling in Minnesota early in the year, but they've now won 5 in a row. They've won 6 out of their last 7. If memory serves, they have the longest winning streak in the NFL right now. I don't think anybody's above 5.
No, I think they're riding a 5-game win streak. So,
and that's with Josh Dobbs and mostly without Justin Jefferson, right? So I don't know what God Kevin O'Connell prays to, but boy, he sure is favored by said deity, because this is 2 years in a row now where you look at the Vikings on paper and it's like, I don't know how they're winning, but they're doing it. and they're getting contributions from really everybody at this point. Ty Chandler, gave him big contributions on the ground in this one, just kind of grinding it out over and over and over, keeping them on schedule. Their average third down was 6 yards in this game, which is manageable. Like, it's super manageable. 9 out of their 15 third downs were 6 yards or less. And so Chandler was huge in this one. Josh Dobbs making plays with his legs to convert a few first downs, and of course making enough big time throws, especially to TJ Hawkinson. Like, there was no one aspect of this Vikings team that was super dominant, but they got contributions from everywhere as a team. And the fact that they can win these tough games as a team is just, it's one of the best stories in football, made even better by the fact that Dobbs has only been there for like 2 weeks and he's 2-0 as a starter.
The Dobbs story is one of the best. I mean, if you take the full cycle of where he was in the preseason, where he ended up in week 1, where he is now, there's not a better story, I don't think, in the NFL going this year. And Dobbs looking as comfortable in this offense as he is, as he has, not having been there a full 2 weeks is, again, both things. It's a massive credit to Josh Dobbs. We know about his intelligence. His ability to process information and turn that into a functional result is exceptional. He looked not lost. There were a lot of stories last week about, getting the cadence on the sideline for the first time before you went on the field, like all kinds of logistical things that happen when you get traded and thrown into the fire. But this week, a completely different picture. And again, a credit to O'Connell and his staff that they could manage that fire hose of information in a way to get him looking that comfortable in, sub 10 days. And the flip side is the same one we talked about with CJ Stroud at the top, which is it's an indictment of other teams. Like, you got basically a street free agent available starter for 10 days, and he's producing numbers like this. Your staff's had 2.5 years and has a starter that is more well-regarded than that. And you can't put up these numbers like at all, not even once this season. It is both things, a credit to Dobbs and O'Connell for sure, and an indictment of lots of other teams that roll out hot garbage on offense every week who've had way more stability and, quote unquote, on paper, way more talent to work with.
I also want to give credit. This is going to sound weird. I want to give credit to the Cardinals for this. And there was a soundbite that went kind of semi-viral of like Dobbs talking about the trading process, where like the Cardinals told him he wasn't going to be traded, and then he was traded out of nowhere and everything like that. The reason why the Cardinals did that was as a favor to Dobbs, right? His agent was working on it, but like they did it as a favor to Dobbs because they knew Kyler was coming back. Like, they knew Kyler was going to play. So what better way to give Dobbs, more exposure so that he can, honestly, this year is going to make Dobbs money for the next like 7-8 years. Like, he's going to be in the league forever now because of this year, right? Agreed. And so the Cardinals were doing him a favor because they're like, we're going to send you to Minnesota, where they got a good offensive line. They got weapons. You can show out. You might be able to go on a playoff run in the NFC, and then you're fucking set for life, dude. Rather than sitting on the bench in Arizona for a team that's going to be drafting in like the top 5. Like, I understand it doesn't sound good to say, oh, we're not trading you, and then we're trading you. But that was the best thing they ever did for Dobbs, was to get him out of there and into a situation like Minnesota where he can make a hell of a lot more money over the next 10 years of his life by being there.
I would 100% agree. And there's so much that gets said in the drafting process, in the trading process, in the contract process, the business side of the NFL. We know what coaches and GMs say a lot of times is 100% opposite from what's going to happen a week later. Oh, no, we're definitely not firing the coach. A week later, he's out on his butt. Like, that's just part of the business. It's not great, but there are reasons. I don't think they're necessarily good reasons a lot of the time, but there are reasons that the business is done that way. And it's done that way everywhere. This is not an Arizona thing. This is an NFL thing. And I would agree that he is setting himself up with his play, with his demonstrated ability for as long as he wants to play in the NFL, he's going to be able to do it. Probably not as a starter, but that doesn't matter. That is a good gig to get if you can get it. The guy that can come in and win you a couple of games, 3 games when your starter's hurt is very, very valuable in this league. Dobbs is at that level or certainly above. He's like borderline starter at this point, and there's not enough of those guys.
There's a lot of teams in the NFL that lost games yesterday where I'm like, would they have won that with Josh Dobbs?
Oh,
And the answer is
100%.
yes on most of them. So
Yeah, I would agree. I want to talk about Hawkinson because he is putting in work this year. And actually, in going back and watching this game again, some of the things the announcers brought up, I was like, really? I went back and checked. And yes, those are true. So yesterday alone, 11 for 134 and a touchdown, but 71 and 685 with 4 touchdowns already this year. And that's somebody was like, he's at 650 yards for the year. And I was like, it's week 10. What? So I looked it up. His projected stats for the year put him at 121 catches, big exclamation point after that one, for 1,158 yards and 7 TDs. Now the TD number down a little bit, but it might be higher than that with as much as Dobbs is favoring him in the offense. He's a favorite target right now, especially over the middle. And those are like, we need to just talk about those numbers for a minute. Those are bonkers numbers. That's edging into the top 15 seasons receiving all time by a tight end. If he hits that number or higher, he's going to be at worst like 15th all time for receiving season by a tight end. That's rare air. We're talking about the Tony Gonzalez's of the world, the prime Gronk years. Like, tight ends don't typically hit that number. And if you're talking about being in the top 15 all time, like the TJ Hawkinson trade is one of those rare trades where it works out. Like the Lions weren't going to pay him. They end up go out and draft Laporta and have him at a much more controlled salary. The Vikings get him and they feature him. Like they use the hell out of him, which is, look, we can, cough, cough, Atlanta, like focus on teams that aren't using their talent at the top level. But like the Vikings are using the hell out of Hawkinson and he is rewarding their investment. And it is one of those trades you look at and go, well, everybody got better. Like, okay, cool. Let's roll.
If he does hit that pace of 121 catches, by the way, that would be the most by a tight end in NFL history. Right now, the record is 116 by Zach Ertz. So there's decent chance at history here in Minnesota. Also, I will say one more note on Hawkinson. I don't know how much physical therapy he has to do on his back every single week. But I can't tell you how many catches I've seen from Hawkinson this year where he's like running down the seam against cover 2, and Dobbs hit him for a touchdown on that ball this week. Beautiful ball, by the way, against cover 2 in the red zone. Got a touchdown out of it. But I can't tell you how many times I've seen Hawkinson run that route this year and just get fucking detonated like by a safety coming like right behind him, just hits him right in the middle of the spine every single week, dude. Like he's got to live in the cold tub at this point. But to his credit, he gets out there every single week and he catches 7-8 more balls every single week and gets absolutely nailed every single week and gets right back up.
It's not just a Hawkinson thing. Like we saw the one on Thursday night with Hayden Hurst. He caught that ball and took a defender like right below the ribs and it just kind of folded him in half, like a 30-degree angle. Like, and he was out for a couple, like he went down, to a knee, walked off. He was only gone for like 2 plays and he came back. And that's like a, 210-pound safety. I think it was Brisker, like hit him right below the ribs, full shot. Like this happens to tight ends all around the league every week. And it is not pretty.
Did you see the shot that Tank Dell took?
Yeah.
By the way, it's like, well, he's pissing blood tonight because good God, like, he got destroyed.
This is the mini rabbit hole of the week. Did you see the blindside block that Tillman laid?
The Browns receiver on when Deshaun was rolling out. Yeah, I did.
Okay, should have been called as a blindside block. Let's be honest. That should be a
crushed
flag.
Him though.
Erased him. Like, and these plays happen in every game, usually away from the action, all season long. And it is a rough physical grind. I mean, like, neither one of those guys was quote unquote involved in the play. Doesn't matter. You're taking some of the heaviest physical contact there is on plays where you're not featured, or you're running back getting completely run over by a defensive tackle trying to do a blitz pickup, and these are not plays that go on the stat sheet, but they take a toll.
I do want to mention a couple things about the Saints before we get out of this one. Obviously the Vikings are going to bring a lot of pressure because they're the Vikings. It still was a lower blitz rate in this game than we're used to for them. Only 36%.
Right.
Only the 10th highest in the NFL. We're used to them being the highest every single week.
Yeah, at like 60.
Yeah, this was like half their normal blitz rate. Still got a bunch of pressures. But specifically, I want to bring up our guy, A.T. Perry, getting his first touchdown. Also, maybe his first catch, like career catch.
Yeah, he got his first catch down the left side. That was surprising to me that it was his first catch as a pro. I assumed that he had a catch at some point in the first 10 weeks. Hasn't worked out that way. So when he caught that ball and I was watching the replay, they were like, it's his first catch in the league. And I was like, what? I mean, congratulations, but what? That seems crazy. And, not even quarter and a half later, he ends up catching his first touchdown. So both first catch and first touchdown in this one.
And it was the most Jameis touchdown ever, right? Because you're watching him, he's going out to his left, and you could see it on the broadcast. Like you see A.T. Perry's all alone, but like there's a DB who's like, "Is he gonna do it? Is he gonna do it?" And you're watching, you're like, "Jameis, don't
do it."
Dare. And he's like, "I'm gonna do it, Jameis. No, I'm gonna do it." he rips it, and A.T. pays it off on the jump ball. But like you're watching the whole time, going, "No, no, 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 no."
Yeah, it's the Goofy meme. It is the live personification of the Goofy meme. I'll fucking do it again. And he's going to do it again. It's the most Jameis performance ever in relief. Like Derek Carr goes down, Jameis comes in, and you're going to get the same thing with Jameis all the time. He is a great passer, and he is going to push the ball down the field, and you're going to get some electric plays out of that. Like Chris Olave came alive after Jameis came in the game. And, you're going to see it. And fans are going to be like, why haven't we been playing this guy? And then the picks come. And literally the Jameis Winston relief stint in this one was the perfect Jameis encapsulation of who he is as a player. Push the ball down the field, bunch of big plays, bunch of yards, 2 touchdowns and 2 picks, all within, less than an entire game. And it's like, yep, that's Jameis in a nutshell. He just isn't going to change at this point.
That's why I love him though. I love that he's just unapologetically himself. I hope we get 15 years of just Jameis relief games because it's the best second half you're ever gonna see, entertainment wise. And I just love him so much. I really do.
It's gonna put you on the edge of your seat in both ways. The yes, 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 and the no, no, no are gonna be pretty much equal, but you will be engaged.
It's must-see TV. Yeah. You mentioned the Tillman block from the Browns, which is as good a segue as we're ever gonna get. That I can come up with on the spot for getting into Browns Ravens. So I want Browns fans to stick with me while I kind of go through this, right? Because there's a lot of nuance to discussing the Browns as a team as well as the Browns offense, and within that, when discussing Deshaun Watson. So that play where Tillman lit up the Ravens edge rusher happened in the first half, right? And when you go back and you watch the all-22, and I might even put in the all-22, just as I'm talking about this, but it was kind of it was like a design rollout with a corner post where Deshaun is supposed to be rolling out to his right, and they're going to flash like he's going to throw the deep corner, and then they come back on the post against a middle field closed safety, and against a middle field closed safety, like if it was too high, he was going to take it kind of super high on the angle, go straight to the end zone. If it's a middle field close safety, he's going to flatten it down right, and then kind of sit in the middle underneath that safety, because obviously there's going to be another basically hook defender that's going to be coming from the other side. So there's this little window underneath the safety inside the corner, and before you get to the hang defender that's going to be coming from the other side. And that's where you're supposed to hit it is, okay, you pick up the block from Tillman, you're rolling out as the receiver's breaking inside. You're supposed to be reading the positioning of the safety to know where the route's going to be, and then you rip it. And he didn't rip it. And that was kind of the story of the first half for this Browns offense, was they kept dialing up all these shot plays that just weren't working for a myriad of reasons. There was some that Deshaun just straight up missed down the side, threw it out of bounds, missed it by 4 yards,
Yeah, foul
and then there
ball.
was the foul ball, right? And then there was the other one where it's like he had it in the middle, like could have gotten to the red zone and then just didn't pull the trigger and then took off and ran incomplete. Like they had 5 total attempts of 20 plus yards as a team. If you take out the PJ Walker Hail Mary, which they brought in PJ Walker to throw the Hail Mary, I think just because of Deshaun's injury. But if you take that out and just look at the 4 balls of 20 plus yard depth from Deshaun, they didn't hit on any of them. And if you're looking in just the first half stats, his average depth of target was 15.1 yards, which is insane. Like that's like a Josh Allen. That's more than a Josh Allen number, actually. Like they were just bombing it down the field, and they weren't hitting anything for again a bunch of different reasons. It was inaccuracy. It was not seeing the field super well down the field, and so they were 6 of 22 for 79 yards, and then throw in just the freakishly crazy good play from Kyle Hamilton for the pick 6, which honestly wasn't really Deshaun's fault. Like that's just a great defensive play. But all the other stuff of just, trying to be aggressive and not being efficient with it, like they got into a hole because of that, because they weren't good enough as a team to be an aggressive pass game against this Ravens defense. Like as a team, Deshaun included, they were not good enough to do that. So what did they do? Coming out in the second half, they acknowledged like, hey, we probably can't throw it more than 10 yards down the field. Like our quarterback's injury is clearly affecting his accuracy. He's all over the place. He's clearly not reading, down the field super well either, or else he would have pulled the trigger on that one in the first half. So let's just keep it simple. We're going to be like just a quick passing game. We're going to rely on Yak. We're going to be efficient with it. We're just going to get completions. We're going to run the ball, and we're going to trust our skill position guys to put the offense on their back and help Deshaun out, because Deshaun needed help in this game. And they fucking showed up. Okay. David Njoku had 58 receiving yards in this game. He had 61 after the catch. Like he would not go down. Jerome Ford would not go down. None of these receivers would go down on first contact. And so when you're looking at the comeback performance for the Browns, I don't necessarily attribute it to Deshaun. Like the 20-yard run, obviously great play, but his average depth of target was less than 6 yards. Like their yak percentage was like through the roof. 87% of their throws went short of the sticks. They had 2 completions that went further than 8 yards past the line of scrimmage. So it wasn't necessarily like a high degree of difficulty for Deshaun, but their team, like as a team, as an offense, as a unit, they are so physical, so tough, so talented that they were able to help out their quarterback who was struggling and get the job done against an elite Ravens defense. So I think there's 2 things that can be true. And I'm trying to be nuanced here because I know Browns fans are very defensive of Deshaun Watson overall. I think 2 things can be true. The Browns as a team are amazing. As a unit, they are amazing. But let's be honest, there's a lot of quarterbacks who could have had an average depth of target of 5.9 yards yesterday and gotten it out and let their guys do a lot of work after the catch. Like there's a lot of quarterbacks who could have done that. So I want to credit the Browns for winning as a team and having a very good team effort. But I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that quarterback performance, especially when you factor in the first half where they couldn't hit Dick 10 plus yards after the line of scrimmage. They could not push the ball down the field, largely because of Deshaun. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that was like a $230 million and 3 first-round pick kind of performance. Like they need him to be better to get the most out of this team, because they can't do what they did every single week. Like they can't just be a yak-based offense every single week. They will not get to where they want to be if they try to do that every single week. It worked this week, and it was a great team win because the team is amazing, but the quarterback has to be better. Like I think both things can be true, and I want Browns fans to not get hyper defensive about that. Like it's okay to praise the team while acknowledging the quarterback was just okay.
They can get hyper defensive if they want to. That's the basis of being a fan. It's short for fanatic. I get it. There is a reality here where 15 yards of average depth of target for the first half is silly. Like that would lead the league. There is not an A dot that high for any quarterback. Really good ones are 12, 13, maybe even 14 yards. It also ups your degree of difficulty, whether or not you're dealing with an injury. Like the farther you go down the field, the lower your percentages are. That makes sense to a lot of fans. They get that. And I will also say Deshaun played better in a lot of the small things that a quarterback needs to do in the second half. He was much better moving in the pocket than he has been in weeks. His vision and ability to complete that short stuff was still better than it's been in a few weeks. So once they sort of dialed that game plan back in the second half, he still executed it better than he's been executing in previous weeks. I'm with you. This was a team win. The Browns won this as a team, and it was with effort. Every time I looked up, another Browns player was twisting out of contact, running a guy over. Njoku and Jerome Ford were the two leaders, but everybody was doing it. I can't tell you how many times in this game I thought, nope, they're stopped. They're not going to make the sticks. Oh, he twisted loose and got it. He ran that guy over and got it. He extended the ball before he was down and got it. Without all that stuff, as close as this game was, they don't win the game. And that is a team sort of striving and driving kind of effort. And the team is playing very well. We've lauded the defense as one of the top, if not the top defense in the NFL. Doesn't really matter which statistic you pull. They could be 1, they could be 2. That means you're elite if you're arguing they're in the top spot. And they held it down this game. They played very, very well. They smushed the run with the exception of, Keaton Mitchell doing Keaton Mitchell things on 3 carries. Other than that, there were like 11 other carries. And, there were 13 non-QB rushes that amounted to less than 3 yards a carry. And we've come in saying, hey, Monken's offense is amazing. The rushing stats are amazing. Like Brown said, we talked about the Browns pass rush being an X factor. Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith both had 5 pressures apiece, came out with, 2.5 sacks combined. Like that was the thing. It made Lamar throw. He didn't get to hit very many balls in this one. He completed 13 for 233 yards. So when he hit big. And by the way, he's still slinging it. Like I know they lost this game, but they scored
sometimes to their detriment. Like that interception.
The
wasn't
choice
great.
was not great. But when you look at the way he throws the ball right now, especially in the first half, was in sharp contrast to how Deshaun was throwing the ball in the first half. He's just ripping it flat lasers. Like I want to say it looks like see it throw it, but it's not. He's throwing anticipation throws, but he's throwing them flat. And it's just this little sidearm, like
cannon, man.
Bam, and he's putting it right on.
Lamar. They don't give him credit for how good his arm is.
Yeah, with a flick, he can get it there on a line. And again, Brown's credit here. This is not Ravens, handed him the game. That's not what I'm saying. Is Lamar played really well, put up enough points to win. Brown's defense was still good enough to basically completely shut the rundown and smother the passing game. Because we've said all year that this secondary is the best secondary in football. And they showed it again. And again, without that, they don't win. Like 3 more points, 5 more points from the Ravens. They don't get to make a comeback in the second half here. So this is a team win for the Browns that they earned through effort and determination and adjustment at the half. Stefanski and his staff said, okay, I just don't think that's going to be the thing today. We're going to have to change up our plan fairly significantly. Deshaun, we still need you to execute. And he did at a better level. We can still have that conversation and say, and he needs to be able to do a lot more, whether it's through healing up or whether it's through, different play calling when they do take those shots down the field, because I'm with you. If they don't have that part of their playbook, there's a lot of teams that they won't beat down the stretch.
Luckily for them, this week's game is the Steelers, and they're hosting the Steelers in Cleveland. And I'll tell you what, outside of Joey Porter, there ain't no corners in Pittsburgh that I don't feel comfortable taking shots against. Like Joey's great. Everybody else in that secondary, especially with Mika being banged up, everybody else in that secondary, I'm like, bombs away, dude. Like, just if you're gonna rip it, like
this is your week.
This is the one. Like, as long as they hold up against TJ Watt and Highsmith and all them, which we'll like, that's a whole different challenge, right? Of staying alive for 2.5 seconds so you can make those throws. But there will be separation. That much I can confidently say. There will be separation galore against the Steelers secondary for everybody not named Joey Porter, at least.
Yeah, I want to credit the Browns offensive line, which is always good. Bill Callahan does an amazing job with that line. When we talk about a Kevin Stefanski run game, a big part of that is Bill Callahan and his line coaching. And their guards got to the second level against the Ravens. And there's because they have really good guards, not everybody's going to be able to replicate that success. But we've been, again, preaching that, the gospel of Mike McDonald and his ability to adapt. But one thing the defense wasn't able to overcome, especially in the second half yesterday, was the guards climbing to the second level and picking off linebackers. Like, they haven't had that yet this year. The defensive line's taking care of that for them. The Browns guards got loose and got on linebackers at the second level, like, routinely. And you saw Jerome Ford look very, very good because of that. So huge credit to the guards. They're two of the best guards in the NFL. So not surprising, but really cool to see them again. You say put the offense on the back of all the skill position players. I think in Cleveland's case, that certainly includes their guards. Those guys were difference makers. So at least they have a chance to hold up against Pittsburgh's defensive line. As good as we know they are going to get theirs. But if I'm matching up offensive lines to try and hold them in check, Browns line would be pretty high up there.
I know there's a lot of nuance to this discussion, but and I know people are going to just skip right over it and just get to the comments and be like, well, you
That's
said
right.
blah, blah, blah. It's like, we're trying here, people. We're trying to
flame throwing. Here it comes.
Realistic on both sides about this thing and talk football without just being blind, like, I think it's a very nuanced sport and it should be talked about in nuanced ways. And it can't just be rah, rah, rah. It can be acknowledging what's great about a team while also acknowledging what is frustratingly mid about a team. And I think, I don't know. Am I making sense? I'm trying to basically stem the tide of Browns fans that are they are bought in, EJ. They are really fucking bought in, as we've come to know.
If you are a Browns fan at this point, you are distilled down. You are hardcore at this point. And, like many fans, you live and die with your team. We understand that. And that is from fan bases all around the league. And I would say, again, that quotient of Browns fans that truly live and die with the Browns is as high as any other team in the league. And we're going to hear about it, and that's fine. But that is still not going to make us sit here and say, oh yeah, everything's great. Like, it's all rosy. You're on a roll. Because this would be a very boring podcast if that's the way we treated every fan base.
Myles Garrett's great, though. We can say that every week. We'll be right.
Yeah,
can't go wrong praising Myles Garrett.
100%.
That's what we're gonna do every time we talk about the Browns. Just be like, Myles is really good.
And if we want somebody from the offensive side, we could say Elijah Moore. Like, Elijah Moore being the glue guy. I can just say, as an Elijah Moore stan from when he was drafted, that never worked out with the Jets, like, he was the glue guy on this offense this week. And I was like, go Elijah, you're getting meaningful snaps and you are doing things that kept that offense going. Was he the star? No. Big three of Amari Cooper and Njoku and Jerome Ford really were, but there was Elijah Moore making 4 or 5 catches for some key first downs and, touchdown. Like, go Elijah Moore. There's your rah-rah moment for Cleveland for the week.
I think we've danced across these eggshells long enough, don't you think?
Yeah, they're powdered.
Why don't we get out of here? We have a Thursday stream to prepare for because we got the other AFC North teams. Ravens, Bengals, Thursday night. Make sure to come back for that. Also want to shout out Homage for being a great clothing partner for us. If you're looking for any sort of NFL gear, or coming soon, any bootleg gear, that will also be on Homage. Our patrons have made their choices for which bootleg merch they want to be available, and we happen to agree with every single choice they made. So that worked out great for us. That will be up on Homage very soon. But to rep your team, of course, they have the NFL license, so they have a bunch of different stuff for every single NFL franchise. Anything you buy from Homage at the link down below, we get a cut of. So we appreciate all of your support. We also appreciate the support of our executive producers over on the Patreon tier that just voted for our merch. Marat, Consti, Andrew, Liam, Connor, and Mike L. Appreciate all of you once again. All right, EJ, it's 12:50. I'm going to go drink something.
I'm going to go eat something. So we're on different ends of the spectrum. But I should mention, we had a suggestion for a Bengals bomb for the stream.
Bengals bomb?
Yeah, it's Jaeger and Orange Crush.
You know, on paper, that sounds not good, but I bet you it's kind of probably good.
I think they might cancel each other out a little bit. So we might try a Bengals bomb on the stream. We'll see.
Who comes up with that?
I no provenance. Like I'm not in charge. But I did look it up and I was like, huh, sneaky, that might be okay. And I bet it's better.
I mean, it can't be worse than pickle vodka and Malort. So like,
right.
Again, my standards are pretty freaking low here each.
Yeah.
So I'll just say, yeah, Ohio fans or Ohio football fans are deranged people.
Yes.
And they terrify me. So we'll make sure to say nice things about the Bengals on Thursday. Anyway, we'll see you guys in a couple days.
Take care.